Okay, well, good morning, 8th grade. We are on our last regular lesson before we go to summer break. So this is chapter 11 review, page 483, okay, and it is our last homework. So when you finish today's homework, you will be done with regular homework for the class, and we just have one test left, and then you will be on summer break. So well done. Okay, so where we left off yesterday was talking about right triangles, right? And yeah, that's it's close enough. So there's a right triangle. So if they give us something and they say that this side is 5, this side is 7, and this side is 13, and they said, is that a right triangle? If we said, is this a right angle? Is there a right angle in here? So what we would do is we would say a squared, so here, 5 squared plus, here's b, 7 squared, does that equal c squared? So now I just punch in my calculator, right? So I go 5 squared, which is 25. So I'm going to do it over here. 25 plus, what's 7 squared? That's 49. So what is 25 plus 49? They said that's supposed to equal, so I added that up just now, that equals 74. So it'll be the square root of 74. But when I do 13 squared, guess what I get? 169. Okay, that is nowhere close to 74. So I would know that this is not right. Right? It's not a right angle. Why? Because this does not equal. Does not equal. Okay? So that's how you do those. Remember, you just multiply them together. You do the two smaller and then use the hypotenuse and see if it works. Okay, so that's really straightforward. I'm not going to belabor the point. You guys got it. Then, if we are simplifying big numbers, okay, let's say we're looking at this, 3,600. That looks hard, but guess what doesn't look hard? The square root of 36. So if I'm going to do this, all I do when I'm going for this is I just do the square root of 36, which is 6. So I know that it's going to have a 6 at the beginning. Then I look at how many zeros there are, and I divide by 2. So what's 2? There's 2 zeros. Divided by 2 is 1. So that means I'm going to have just 1 0. Okay, so it's basically taking this in half. However many zeros are left, and taking that in half. Okay, so if I have a big number, this is one of your homework problems, so you may want to do it. 250,000, right? 250,000. That's a big number to try and find a square root. But again, what do? I just look at the front and say, what's the square root of 25? Well, that's easy. I know what that is. That's 5. Then I take how many zeros I have, which in this case is 1, 2, 3, 4, and divide by 2, right? I cut them in half, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I'm going to have 1, 2 zeros, and my answer is going to be 500. Okay, not very hard. You guys totally got it in the bag, and I believe in you. Not bad. Now, if they give us something like this, the square root of 216. Let's say they give us the square root of that. Well, this is not a perfect square root, but I need to try and factor it, right? And it's an even number, so I'll start by dividing it by 2. And when I divide it by 2, I get 108, which I can divide by 2, which then I get 54, and I get 9 and 6. And so I'm going to write this 6 is what? 3 times 2, and this 9 is 3 times 3. Okay, now the way that I then change this is I need to say what has a matching pair, right? There's a 3 and there's a 3, so that equals 3 squared. So I know I can pull a 3 out, which when I take the square root of that is 3. Let's see, here's a 2 and here's a 2, so I know I can take those out. That's 2 squared, which when I take the square root of that is just a 2. And then look what I'm left with. I'm left with this 3 times 2, which is actually 6. So I take whatever's left that doesn't have a match, and he goes inside the radical sign, inside the square root of sign. Then I take what was out here, and I multiply them together. So 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 6 square root of 6. Okay, and the way you check that is on your calculator. Do 6 times the square root of 6, and I get 14.69. So then let's try the square root of 216. and I get the same answer. Same thing, 14.69. Okay, so this is our grand answer right there in the blue and black and blue, all bruised up, right? We just factor. Okay, so let's look at one that's like this. The square root of 5 times the square root of 30. Okay, now all I'm going to do in this one, remember when you have the square, so there's a times sign because they're against each other. When you have that, all you do is it becomes the square root of 5 times 30. Okay, so I could do 30 times 5, which is 150. So I have now the square root of 150, which means that since I've condensed that, now I want to try and factor it. So I'm going to erase that even. So if you need to write it down, the square root, so I can do this. The square root of 150. So now I break it down. I say, what goes into 50? Well, 50 times 3, which is 5 times 10, which is 2 times 5. I don't know why I put a 3 there. 2 times 5. Okay, so what do we have in common? 5 and 5, which is 5 squared. Take the square root of that, which is 5. So on the outside, I'm going to have 5, and then what am I going to have on the inside? Well, what do I have left? A 2 and a 3. They're not matching, so I do 2 times 3, which is 6. So on the inside, I'm going to have 6, and there's my final answer. 5 times the square root of 6. Okay, so that's what you do in a multiplication when it's simpler. Then when we have harder multiplication, let's say we have 3 times the square root of 10, all that times 4 times the square root of 5. Okay, if I have something like this, the first step is to do these guys multiplied. 3 times 4. So I know I'm going to have 12 at least. Then I do these guys multiplied, which is 50. Okay, if you need to write that down, 10 times 5 is 50. So this is my first step. Right now I've rewritten it like that. I've done the multiplication. That's good. Okay, 12 times the square root of 50. So now that I have 12 times the square root of 50, what do I have to do? I have to factor this to 5 and 10, 2 and 5. Let's look at this. Matching again, 5 and 5 with a 2 left over. So now I'm going to have this 12, and it has to be multiplied by this 5. All that times the square root of 2. So what is 12 times 5? Well, that's a big number. 60. And all of that times the square root of 2. So that's my final answer. Okay. Now, let's say that I'm doing some dividing, right? Let's say they give us the square root of 36 divided by the square root of 2. Now, I can take this as a perfect square, right? 36 is a perfect square, but 2's not. So I don't want to do that. I want to rewrite this as the square root of 36 divided by 2. Now, what is 36 divided by 2? Well, that's 18. So now I'm left with the square root of 18. And I come over here. I'm going to erase this guy for a second. I come over here and factor 18 into 9 and 2, 3 and 3. Oh, look, there's my 3's. So I'm going to have my final answer be 3 times the square root of 2. Okay, now here's one that actually works out worse if I do it that way. So if they give me the square root of 25 divided by 121, I say, wait a second, 25 is a perfect square and 121 is a perfect square. So I rewrite this, the square root of 25 over the square root of 121, which the square root of 25 is 5 and the square root of 121 is 11. And I've just gotten rid of my radicals, and I'm left with 5 over 11. Okay, so that's some good review. Then, moving right along, when we do adding and subtracting, remember that let's say 4 times the square root of 3 minus 2 times the square root of 4, not square root of 4, square root of 5. If we have something like this, we cannot solve. This is the most simple. Why? Because it's like variables. This 3 has to match this 5, and they don't match. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work to solve that. So that's as far as we can go. But let's say it was 4 times the square root of 3 minus 2 times the square root of 3. Now all we do is these guys stay the same. The square root of 3 stays the same down here. And I just do 4 minus 2. So 4 minus 2, which is 2, give me a grand answer of 2 times the square root of 3. It's not very hard. You guys can totally get that. So just make sure it has the same end. And if it's a bigger number, like if it's 2 times the square root of 20 plus 3 times the square root of 20, right? You can make sure that you can factor these 20s as well. Okay, so just don't forget to do that. Sometimes they won't look the same, they won't look like they have anything in common, but they actually will have something in common. Okay, so hopefully that makes some good sense. I'm going to do some cube roots and then we will be done. So if you have anything 2 cubed, right, that's the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Remember though, if you have negative 2 cubed, what do you get? Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which is actually negative 8, right? So I go from having 8 to having negative 8. So remember how that works. That's how you cube something. And then when it comes to taking the cubed root, we have a 3 right there, and we say what times what times what. Let's say if we did this one is 8. The answer would be 2, right? And then we can actually take the cubed root of negative numbers. Why? Because it's just the opposite. So if we know what the positive root is 2, we can put the negative sign in front and find what the negative would be. Okay, and so you can use your calculator for those. Not too bad. Make sure I would just make a list, like have 1 cubed equals 1. 2 cubed equals 8. 3 cubed equals 27. Dot, 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 right? All the way down. 4 cubed. And you can just type that into your calculator. And then if it asks you for a big number, like let's say it says, what is the cubed root of 1,331? You type that in your calculator, or you have already done it, and you go, the cubed root of 1,331 happens to be 11. And you're like, whoa, that's a perfect number. Yes, sometimes it comes out to a fraction, but sometimes it will come out to a perfect number and not a decimal. And then you're like, hey, that's great, good news. Okay, so there is the second half of our review with radicals. So radical section. But, sorry, that was terrible. So we're going to move on now to our homework. So chapter 11, this is page 483. We are going to be doing 25 through 46 all. Okay, just to give you some good practice, make sure you know how to do that. 25 through 46 all. Your last homework assignment before our last test. So great job so far this year. Hang in there. One more assignment and then one more test, and you are done with 8th grade math. Okay, Mr. H, it's over and out.